welcome to Oh Brother, a podcast of three brothers trying to figure it all out. With your hosts, Brandon, Colin, and Aaron. On this week's show, toilet paper, Paul Revere. Ahoy!
Ahoy!
It is a day.
Oh no, that's never good.
No, it never is.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't caught on by now, in the Midwest, as part of our ongoing criteria of how to define the Midwest, right? If you say to somebody, "How's your day?" and they say, "Well, it was a day," that means it was horrible. Right? That's code for terrible, right? That's a little decoding for you here.
Yeah, thank
right?
you. Oh,
this
nice,
means
thank you.
Abysmally bad. Okay,
It's been abysmal and a half. It's this whole week. So
just for our friendly neighborhood international audience. Hello.
Welcome. The thesaurus and dictionary will be attached as an addendum to the show notes.
It is ongoing. We're building it, so
yeah, it's fine. Okay. It's fine. It's never finished. It's a constant refinement process. Right. No, peek behind the curtain here. I'm having to prepare to go cover some visits for a staff member who's leaving. It's going to be kind of tricky. Basically, I'm going to be gone all of the next month to get this accomplished. That means a lot of stuff has to get done. And there's the pivotal weekend is the weekend that we're going to.
We're going to be at Aaron's wedding.
Yeah. And so my transition into this is not as like home and then like wedding and then like not home. It also just so happened that this weekend people were like, oh, like it's fine. Like I'm not going to book. Nobody's going to book any visits. We're all booking right now. We're all running. We're all traveling. We're all doing this at the same time. Go, 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 go. So what this is, seriously. Oh no. Like, on Monday, we woke up and we were like, nice, easy weekend. And then by Tuesday, we were like, we have room for no more. And then yesterday we got two more people booking. And then today somebody was like, I got to get out of town because I got a family emergency. So it was just like,
and you're going to take your dog with you, right?
It was just an onslaught. And we went from like nothing. We went from like our standard, like 2 visits in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, 2 in the evening, which is kind of our dailies, to my staff members are now working for like 8.5 hours straight, like nonstop, which is not fun. And I can't, what would normally happen is I would take over some of the overflow, right? And go down there, but like, yeah, we can't,
but you're not going to be there.
Sans me, right? That's not what I can be there for. So I just had to that's been chaotic, just trying to structure that and communicate that to clients and blah, blah, blah. And with staff as well, being like, hey, this is okay. Plus stress with we still have a pretty new staff member down there, and their weekend went from 2 visits to 9, and all 7 of them, the 7 new ones, are all brand new.
Oh my goodness.
And so, and normally I would be there to shadow and teach and show. So I'm having to put together some videos from my office to walk through what to expect, and additional notes and help.
That's all right. We'll video call them from the car. I'll be extremely helpful the whole time. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine.
If anything is like this past weekend, like we had a staff member who showed up and like the lockbox wasn't working, but they were entering the code for the alarm, not the lockbox, and that set them off by 15 minutes. And then we opened it up and the client had not put a key in the lockbox. So then staff member had to drive to office to get key to come back to find. It was like, so I'm really hoping that like even though it's busy, it's one of those of I hope everything goes well. So trying to prepare for everybody, getting them the notes, getting them information. Meanwhile, Megan and I 2.5 months ago committed to, we had somebody who reached out to us and like, hey, I'm putting together this thing about talking about the pet care industry I'd love for you all to be guest speakers. You can do it live or record it. And we were like, well, we're going to record this. And they're like, great. Well, we kind of forgot about that. And
I was going to say, you haven't recorded it, have you?
Haven't recorded it. And we really wanted to be together to do that. We didn't want to record it over Zoom. Well, I'm disappearing for a month where we're not going to record. And when I am home on the weekends, I don't want to be recording any of this stuff.
No.
So we sat down, and today we were like, today is our recording day. The kids are at school. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to record our podcast episode for next week. We are going to record this video about what this person asked us to. And then we had also agreed more recently, like before the person went, of doing a training module about mistakes and things we've learned about onboarding clients or onboarding staff. So that also had to be a video. So today we were going to record. All we had to record was a 30-minute episode, a 30-minute video for about the pet care industry, and then a 30-minute video about our onboarding process. And
let me guess. It did not take an hour and a half.
No, it did not. It was a recording day fail. Like fail and a half. Our episodes, like typically when we record, like I kind of script it out and put bullet points, and I have things to talk about. Just there may be a tiny bit more preparation than other podcasts in the world. I don't know.
Hey, listen, extemporaneous podcasts are exciting. Okay,
they are.
And the tagline is literally "Who knows what will happen." Okay, so I feel like it's on brand. It's okay.
That's mostly talking about us because we have no idea. and so I sat down and we recorded for like 45 minutes, and both Megan and I are like really stressed about getting all this done and me leaving. And so we record for, I think it was like 50 minutes. And I think we're going to get about 35 minutes of audio out of that. I was like, okay, great. That's done. Okay. And then we take a break and we go and record this video. And both her and I are like, we've got notes, but it's a video, right? So I'm recording my video. I have a boom mic that we got, and we're in the corner, and I've got video settings, and I've got this tripod, and I've got everything set up and lighting in the office. And we recorded, and we're like, okay, that was kind of manic. As Megan later said, she went, that video is a vibe. That's definitely,
it's all right.
It's one way to do it.
It's okay.
And then we go to lunch, we come back, and we go, well, let's record the module for onboarding. And we record that, and we're like, oh, well, we got a little bit more time because that ended up taking us about 45 minutes to get done for a 30-minute video. And we got a little bit more time before we can run and get the kids picked up from school. Let's record this video really quick. The second one about the pet care industry. We recorded. I was like, that was amazing. We hit 40 minutes of recording time with like a minute off, whatever. Like it was going to be great. Yeah. I jump up, I come around,
and something bad,
and the camera goes, failed to save. Oh no! and it said failed to save to camera roll, but don't worry, it's saved in the files. You can export it by plugging into your computer. And I was like,
but it didn't work, did it?
It saved the first 7 minutes.
No.
And so we go, okay, do we splice this onto the old one or do we record a brand new one? And she and I were like, we don't feel like that first recording is our best. Like it is not a good representation of us. We've got to record.
Unfortunately, the best is now gone.
So then we went, we're going to record again. So I get the whole studio set back up. We slam it together. I grab my phone. It is because I have been using it for recording these videos and like we've been going nonstop all day. It's at like 30%. And that's after I had charged it back up to 70. And the second time I had recorded, my phone went from 73% to 5% over the course of recording that video because because I'm using an external mic with it, I can't also then
like,
charge it.
Yeah. So it's sucking extra power to
sucking extra battery and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. I've got this little splitter, and I'm going to split it, and I'm going to plug it into an external battery and the microphone, and blah blah. I turn on, and it shows it's charging. I run around, we set, we play, we record, we nail 40 minutes. We're like, dang, that was sweet, perfect. We come around, and my phone is dead. And it's because I want to use the back camera for the phone, not the selfie camera, because the selfie camera is garbage, right? And this is going out, and this is going to be part of somebody's
media, like package
and curriculum and thing. And I want it to look good for them. I don't want to send them junk. So tomorrow we're going to re-record.
Why? You shouldn't met. So here's another, like, anytime that we have people do that for like school, for like professional development days and stuff, anytime they do that and send us things, they send it like they recorded it on their laptop camera from 1997, right? It's horrible. And they're all like, can everybody see? You're like, no, I can't. It doesn't matter though. Just keep talking and whatever. But like, they did one at the beginning of the year. It's just like, what is this? What is going on? So don't feel bad. It's okay.
I know. And I'm trying not to be a perfectionist about this, but at the same time, I want it to be good.
We all know that you are.
Right. Yeah. So I can't help it, right?
You just have to embrace it, right? You have to. You can't deny it. You can't deny yourself, Colin.
I like, and we have all of the stuff to do it. I just like, oh my gosh, like it was like my phone was just like, no, I'm not doing this.
Getting it to work properly is like so annoying.
Exactly. And so, and because it's video, I personally, like, I'm awful at video. I don't like doing video because I can't chop things up, re-record, go back over as easily as you can with audio.
It's hard to do that, to make it consistent, right?
Right. It really takes somebody to do it really, really well. And then you who are being shot by the video have to put your hands in the same place and reset and like remember where you messed up and keep like it just. So anyway, it's a whole thing, and we're going to get this re-recorded, but like, my goodness, it was exhausting. And when I sat down, I was like, what did I actually do today? I did hardly anything.
Now, that's not for lack of trying, because you tried to record it 3 times, and through various exciting circumstances, it didn't work. But that doesn't mean you didn't do
well. And then I was reminded of like, well, basically, we did 3 extemporaneous speeches. One of them we've done 3 times, right? So we spoke for what's that? 1, 2, 3. Like 1, 2, 2.5 hours, 3 hours today. Like that's a lot of speaking. And
tell me about it.
And trying to be. Exactly. You being in front of children, like you have to be engaging because it's video. You have to, be on. So that was today, right? And then we're continuing to stare down at this of like my tomorrow list just went of all this other stuff, and it's like, well, here we go. But it's just gonna be part of it. It's gonna be okay. But I was just
it'll be fine.
I was so tired.
Well, obviously,
yeah, and it was like, especially when I like look at my calendar for today, and I even allocated an hour for each of those 3 recordings, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, no.
It didn't work.
It didn't work, but it's okay. So now I've got videos to edit. Because even though I said we're not going to edit these videos, I'm going to edit.
You're going to edit them.
I have to edit. So
let's give it a little bit of
just a little bit of editing. Yeah. It's going to be fine. So that's what today was was
there you go.
all about recording day fail, but not failure. It was just didn't pan out the way we were
not quite as triumphant as you had hoped for. You will not be building any arches in Paris for your triumph.
No, or just maybe half, maybe like one, just one,
a little baby one
side of it,
like a Lego arch.
Yes, yes, would be fine with me.
I like it. Your story triggered side thought, right? Very random thought, and we'll come back to whatever you want to next. But
you're fine.
I found one of those other words that triggers things in my brain when you were speaking. That word is, of course, lockbox. It is for some strange reason that is very strongly burned into my brain in association with the 2000 election skits from Saturday Night Live. It's like something talking about what is Al Gore and W in the debate thing.
Lockbox.
The same one where W's like strategery.
Yes. Yeah. Oh my gosh,
it's a very strong sense memory. It's just etched into my brain.
Oh my gosh, that was man. That was a time, wasn't it? That was such.
It was the last time I actually watched Saturday Night Live, so there's that. But I don't.
Oh, yes, I'm going to be throwing in a clip there from that. There was a mad. Do you remember those were so funny. That was great. I remember seeing the lockbox.
Yeah, the presidential debate thing.
Yeah. Strategery.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. No.
I had to share my random brain. My brain just triggered a thing, and I was like, what is that?
Do you remember? It was about that same time. There was a what was it? It was not. It was a mad. I need to find this video is out there where it was this exact same time. I thought it was Mad Gab or Mad Lab or something like that. Because it was Mad Lab, and it was a song.
I don't know.
Between George W. Bush and Al Gore, singing "This Land Was Made for You and Me," but Al Gore says the line of "You can't say nuclear, that really scares me." Sometimes,
yes.
And then
it's really.
And yes, I won 3 Purple Hearts. This land was made.
I do remember this.
Oh my
gosh! I thought about that a long time.
Right? I probably watched that about that's. Oh my goodness! So
I don't remember what that was, but I do remember that. That's funny.
I'll have to do some internet sleuthing for that for sure. Yeah. I had. Oh man, I wish I need to write these down. I have a pocket notebook for these exact reasons, but just this week, I'm gonna have to think about this. It's not going to come to me right now, but I had another one of those things of what the word where I said a word or Megan said a word, and I just kept saying in my brain something just kept popping up right behind it. And I was like I can't turn that off. It's
yeah. I had another one of those earlier this week as well, but this one just showed up right now. Whenever you said that, so I'm thinking about the weirdness that was the Saturday Night Live between Al Gore and George W. Bush.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of that's such a weird time capsule there. It really
is, right? I feel they always I don't know. Again, that's the time I stopped watching Saturday Night Live. But the presidential things were always really funny up until at least that point. I really can't. I have no idea about afterwards because I didn't watch them. So I have no opinion whatsoever after circa 2000, really. But
not surprisingly, our last cultural touch point with something was late 90s, early
Y2K.
2000s.
That's a little problematic, right? I'm so culturally out of touch that Y2K is my last milestone.
That's what it is. The meme that you sent,
I know.
Remember, turn your computer off before midnight. I don't know how
I
to
died. I literally died. I was like, oh my gosh.
I don't know how to appropriately, or if there is a way of appropriately capturing just the intensity of that as a cultural phenomenon of a time, right? That the where it really was like technology is about to implode and our civilization as we know it will cease to exist, and there's nothing we can do about this, and just like run for the hills kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was so and I remember at the time like not being really freaked out. I wasn't freaked out about it, but it was very aware of it, and I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking like for looking like, so I was the same way, right? I would have been like a freshman. So like, you know, my brain was like barely functioning at that point anyway. But I remember feeling the same way, like, oh, whatever. Like, I don't really believe this. This is like whatever thing. But looking back now, like with the ability to look back and kind of like look at a lot of that time period as a whole, right? What it feels like to me is that like it's like a last vestige of Cold War thought, but like 8 years later, right? It really feels very Cold War to me when I think about this. And it makes sense because all of the like adulty people that were handling all this stuff, that they would have lived through all of that. You know what I mean? They would have had to deal with all that. So those thoughts are not new to them, really, right? Mm-hmm. These are sort of ingrained thoughts from growing up of like, oh my gosh, the world is literally ending at any moment, because for like 60 years, the world could have literally ended at any moment. So like, there's that. But it feels very like Cold War-esque to me, like this whole like panic. And it was insane, right? Like it was actually crazy, right? People like nothing in grocery stores, right? People buying like the most random stuff ever, right? Like just the weeks and months leading up to this of like, oh my gosh, this is it, right? This is Prince was right. You better party like it's 1999 because there's literally nothing else after this, right? Mm-hmm. It's just going to be a post-apocalyptic wasteland because everything that you own will just shut down because we don't have enough zeros in our power grid system, right? Like, oh no. And to me, the funniest thing about all of this, right? It was just like the thing that like encapsulates it for me, like this panic, like this huge, like months long panic, right? Where everybody had an opinion and everything was going to happen. And then like weirdly differently from nowadays, right? Because we have months long panics all the time now and everyone's just sort of like emotionally dead to it and it doesn't really matter. Like there was a day. This one had a timeline. There was a time, right? Mm-hmm. Like 11:59. That is the deadline. Like nowadays, the panic is just like some obscure number. Like it's over when people get bored of talking about it, right? But there was a timeline, and the most like ironically funny part to me is that the payoff, the only payoff that I saw for any of this, was that the Math Blaster's date said 1900 when we logged onto it the next time. Boom. That was it.
Yep.
It was like, it's 1900. I was like, this is hysterical. Like, oh no, look, Math Blasters cope just fine. They didn't go, oh my gosh, they didn't have a existential crisis saying, but I was not invented in 1900. Oh my gosh, how can I cope with my life? No, they're just like, here we go.
And that was real. that was really the unknown, right? So this it goes back to what them not encoding a large enough storage segment for the date code in computer chips.
And I can't remember what date it was.
Well,
right.
I think it was just they just stored, it was like a 2-digit code of like, because it was in the 50s or whatever, and they started this and memory was really bad. This is what I remember of this. They were just storing it as 52, 53, 54, 55 because it was always assumed to be 1900, and nobody thought that they were going to have to add more to those. And that's how long these computer programs stick around, and it just becomes part of, when I code this, I can save space and just make it 2 digits. But then people started to see and realize going, but what happens when it goes back to 0? And
I think part of it too is like, so there, if we think about like when you encode things with like bits, right? And because this is early times, listeners, from 2023, we're talking about like bits, not like gigabytes, terabytes, megabytes, like bytes. Like that's it, right? Listen, tiny. These numbers are like laughably tiny nowadays when we have these huge processing powers. But like the reason that if we think about like original arcade video games, right? The reason that there's an end to these like procedurally generated levels is just because they run out of bit storage. Right? Like some of these are like Donkey Kong, like famously, like there's not an end, like there's like you can play it until like it just stops working. Right? Because the number of there's only like 4 ones and zeros to like take up space. And when you get to all full, it can't flip over.
Right.
It can't flip over because there's not 5 place values. Like this is very simplified, right, how it works, right? But let's say there's just 4 place value places. And when you do these ones and zeros, when you're only talking binary, right? When you count in binary, it works strangely, but you just keep adding a space, right? And your place value keeps growing. But when you design your program to have a certain amount of place values, when it gets to the end, it just shuts down because it can't do anything. Like it can't function because it's designed to just go to the next one, and there is no next one. So it just stops. It just turns off. And that is kind of what they were facing with this. Like it was coded on such low grade technology that there was actually not enough like place values for it to flip to that 2000. Because in binary, that's like a whole other set, right? That's a whole other like power of 2 place value that you need that didn't exist. It was not there.
Yeah.
It was like the hard limit was reached. Like the physical memory storage was it. And so like sometimes when that happens, the program just like, it just keeps repeating the last thing and it's whatever. But sometimes like a Donkey Kong, the game just turns off
because
it shuts down.
It doesn't have enough memory to continue processing that.
It can't figure out what to do next, so it just shuts down.
And they were worried about that's going to happen to banks and
and
telecommunications,
like nuclear silos and like just crazy stuff. Like everything will turn to power stations, right? Like it'll.
Yeah, and then we do what? And you're right. Like just the. And I remember the news of that time of talking about how corporations were scrambling to add patches and whole industries popped up around of consultants coming in and guiding people on how to do those upgrades. And I mean, it was big business to get all of that done. I even though I wasn't freaked out about this because, it wasn't that old, but like watching this was just like, well, that's a lot going on. But I just remember like it was just hysterical about what's going on in all of the talking heads of going, this is the end is nigh. And then there were the ones going, no, this isn't that bad. And it was just back and forth. And it was really just this extreme anticipatory nature to this and you likening it to the last vestiges of the Cold War is really apropos because there is a countdown to this. And at any moment it could go off. But we knew when it was going to go off. So we all were just kind of waiting and holding our breath going, is it? Is it? Is it? And listeners can assume that it wasn't.
Yes, right. Like I do remember that. Like whenever you're watching Dick Clark up there, right? There was a sense. There was just a little bit of like trepidation, like because the ball's dropping. Here's Dick Clark, and you're just like, what is going to happen in 5 seconds when that ball hits the ground? Like what? Like, and I think there was kind of this weird like collective exhale when like everybody's televisions were still on, right? Like you appeared to be still alive, right? Like oh, there you go. I did it.
Yeah,
because even though you're just like, oh man, everything's fine, they're overreacting, you're still kind of like,
or are we? Maybe I don't know.
Just in case, right?
Just gonna scoot over here.
Yeah. So I was like, I do remember that of being like, even though the whole time I was like, guys, you're overreacting like majorly. Still on New Year's, I was kind of like, okay, all right, it's fine. It's good.
Glad I have that Faraday cage out back when everything starts going off. I don't know.
I just remember the news reports about like the grocery stores and like the crazy stuff people are buying, like 8 billion bags of like charcoal and like propane forever, right? It's like the Midwest when ice storm's coming, but like magnified by like 100, right? It was kind of like that.
Well, because all of a sudden everybody was going, well, I guess I need a little bit extra, and then going, well, but how long is this going to happen? So maybe I should have a little bit of extra, and then just it kept perpetuating off, right? And then just as the hysteria we saw during COVID in the toilet paper run,
I was just thinking like that. We've seen this relatively recently, right? Like with just like random stuff being gone during the pandemic, right? Like randomly, like all grocery stores everywhere were just like out of like green beans.
Yeah.
What? Yep. Why? And it's just because people that were like normally buy 2 cans were like, maybe I'll buy 4, just in case, right?
Then,
like,
well,
and if everybody's doing that, like, just weird stuff starts like just going away, and it's always stuff that you like. Because that was the weird thing about going to the store, right? There's like the most random stuff would be gone forever. Like toilet paper, I understand. Kleenexes, I understand. Medicine, I understand. Lima beans, like what? Like I don't know.
Well, because all of a sudden, what do people do? They go, oh, there's not as many on the shelves. Well, I don't know if there's going to be more tomorrow. I should go ahead and grab a few extra. And then the next person that comes along goes, wow, the shelves are really bare. And it has this cascading effect, this positive feedback loop of basically it was like, if everyone would just stop buying something real quick, we'll actually put the extra cans that are just sitting in the back, and then you would never have known, right?
Yeah, because they're back there.
Yeah,
but we just don't have time to get them out there because our staff is working and doing other things, right? So like,
or like the toilet paper, it was like they're coming, like it's on a truck, like be there in a minute, just like stop, hold on. But instead, and my goodness, could you imagine Y2K in the day with today, like with all the social media?
Oh my gosh, Y2K with Twitter would be the absolute worst thing ever. We're lucky that Y2K was like bad internet blogs and like AOL Instant Messenger, right? That's like like your Yahoo email and random internet message boards and AIM, right? With Twitter, oh my gosh, be the absolute worst thing of all time. Like it would have just like exploded.
Well, and I'm just thinking of I saw them on our community Facebook pages of, hey, I was just at the grocery store and this is a photo of what the shelves look like. Better get out and shop before blah, 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 blah. Like people were actually posting that kind of stuff. And then people would comment and they'd be like, I'm leaving work now, or here I'm going, like blah, blah, blah. Like it just drove the hysteria even more.
That's true. And that's one of those terrible examples of like, because that, like, this is an example of like those people, like, they genuinely thought they were helping other people, right? They like actually believed that they're being helpful. And what you're doing is making everything worse for everybody. But they didn't realize that. And I imagine if you told them that today, if they're listening to this right now, they won't believe me. They'll say that I'm wrong, right? Because their belief is so strong in themselves that they were doing the right thing to help people. But actually, they were just making everything worse.
Yep. They thought they were being the bearer, the herald of the oncoming doom, because everyone wants to be known as the person who let everybody know first and who was the Paul Revere of the British are coming, right?
Yes. You're not the Paul Revere. You're not the toilet paper Paul Revere. Okay, calm down.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah, you're not. But everyone feels like they
There's my next short story, by the way. Toilet.
I'm currently asking ChatGPT to write me a story about.
Mine's gonna be better. Bet.
Toilet paper.
It'll be great.
But yes, it was. It feeds that very much into that psyche, and they do want to have that that ability, and I think there's a little bit of power, so to speak. But yeah, I can't imagine, because it was stressful enough through COVID, and me. I mean, even when like you could logically sit there and go that nothing's wrong. But when you get ping after ping, or you see post after post, or you see these things coming up, you still start to have that same thing that happened in Y2K as the ball's dropping 5, 4, 3, going, well, I think it's going to be fine, but also like maybe I should run to the store just real quick, just in case.
Yeah, right. Like there's just enough uncertainty for you to be like, you can't quite convince yourself that like 100% that it's fine, right? Like the percentage is pretty high. It's like 97, but like you're still like, I don't know.
Oh, my goodness. So yeah, and that's, and like you said, now when we've got the end of the world and every other week is this level of catastrophe and global doomsday, I don't know, like people, you do become numb to it, but also like what other kind of implications or impacts does that have on a person's psyche, right? To be at that level? Like that can't be good, right? Like that's not that's not healthy.
No, and it feels like we've been that way basically since Y2K, right? Maybe that's just me being like self-aware at that time, and like when I was younger I didn't really notice things, but like it just sort of feels like that all the time, because we had Y2K and then the Gulf War Part 75, right? And did 9/11,
9/11,
just like all this like just insanity, like it just like didn't stop ever.
Well, and that too of like with the Y2K of like, great, we survived that. Here's a wonderful decade ahead, because we were fine. That was a pretty, it really was the last vestiges of Cold War influence and all that stuff. I mean, I say that now knowing full well that many people are still in spots of power who like really love the Cold War. That was like their favorite time.
That's true. I wonder what their name rhymes with. Does it rhyme with Scootin'? Maybe. Right. We see that.
Don't know.
Someone whose name rhymes with Scootin' definitely likes that Cold War mentality, as we have seen for a year and a bit now, about power grabs in Ukraine, right? This is a very Cold War attitude. Like, this is a Cold War behavior from that person whose name that I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure it rhymes with Scootin'.
No, I'm not coming with anything at all. It's
nothing. I'm drawing a blank here. It's so weird, right?
I mean, anyway, but like 2000s, they were off to a great start. How did we name them? Were they the double lots? Were they just 2000s, like double O's? Like who knew? And then
that was the next controversy. What year is it even? How do we?
I remember that.
Oh my gosh, I remember that. It was the most manufactured garbage of all time.
So like
how do we refer to this new decade? Like,
who knows?
By not caring about it. Like, what are you talking about?
Right, exactly. I don't care. And then 1 year later, and a half and some change, global terrorist attack, like worst thing. And then that really just set it off like to the moon since then. Like you're right. Like it was like boom, boom. And then it's just been ever since with all sorts of stuff that was not, I mean, it really does start to, I feel like, not the okay, put on your tinfoil hats, everybody. Here we go. We're going down. No, but that being plugged in at that level really does impact how you interact with news in the world, how you view what your thoughts are about the future, and really how you just take in and process that information.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you hear all these things like people talk about, like all these it kind of goes with that new, like those news headlines you read every once in a while, like, why are millennials so burned out? You're like, gee, I wonder, who could know? Like, come on, bro. Like, really that difficult for you to understand? Like, there's been nothing but global catastrophes for 23 years. I don't really know what you want from me.
Yeah,
like,
nonstop.
Like the sky is falling literally every day. So I don't really know like why you're so cool about it, but like I'm a bit frazzled, okay? And I don't but yeah, it is very odd, right? There is some tinfoil to be had there, right? Of like, some weirdness about that, right? We could see that from like those like really mysterious reports of like, oh my gosh, there's a global oil shortage and a fuel crisis. And what's that? British Petroleum made its highest profits ever last year? Like, what? Wait a minute. Those two sentences don't go together. What are you talking about? like, hold on a minute here. I think I'm being had. Like, there is, the tinfoil is not super far off in a couple of those places, but like, again, it's hard to know which ones actually are tinfoil worthy and which ones are just like, whatever, that's not a big deal. But some of them are actually like, huh, that's weird.
Well, and then
how did you make that much of a profit when the whole world was shut down? That doesn't make any sense to me. What's going on here?
Zane? Well, then I sit there and I think, okay, what are you trying to desensitize me to? Like, what are you wanting me to get to the point where I just don't care anymore about this stuff?
Yeah,
like,
pretty much. Yeah, it's like
I'll just go over here and do this thing anyway. So you, how from one millennium to the next, how did your debates go?
They went great. They're actually really good.
Nice.
We finished them on Monday, right? And so today I told them the final scores of what they did, right? And I didn't. I told them what the tallies finally were, right? So the breakdown was I gave them points for did you have visual aids? You got points for that, right? Okay. And when I say points, I literally mean tally marks, right? Okay, I was just keeping tallies, right? Were you like if you just in general were like speaking like well, like if you were kind of like just being loud enough and like appropriate speaking voices, like points for that, right? Points for like just like big impactful statements, like like when they say something, it makes you go, oh yeah, right. Oh. And like points for having facts in your argument. Oh. So anytime you said a fact, bam, check mark, right? Like tally mark.
So you wanted to say them true things, have mic drop moments, and like have cool things to look at. Okay.
Now, because the problem came when some of them had like funny mic drop moments, but there was no facts anywhere. I was like,
no facts were to be found.
No facts to be found. Right? They were like, oh, that's a funny thing to say. Like, yeah, but is it true? Yeah. Like, I'm gonna make sure it's not true. So I gave them the breakdown of like, because I split every class in half and half was Team Athens, and the other half was Team Sparta.
Yeah.
Right. So I gave them the breakdown of per class, right? I did like within that half, they broke into subsections where one team, one like subcommittee, right? Had to talk about the government of each one. So I had to like tell how, and they did a really good job of talking about like the different ways that Athens and Sparta like make laws and who was allowed to vote and all that stuff. So they did a really good job.
Oh, interesting.
One was about citizenship, right? So they could talk about the rights of the citizens, who got to be a citizen, right? And this is where they threw a lot of shade, like, well, you don't even let women do stuff, like, right? Like, we'll take that, sucker, right? Like, yeah, but you have a giant population of slaves. What is that about? Like, don't look over there. It's fine, right? Like,
anyway, back to you.
Anyway, and then the other one was just values, which was just kind of like miscellaneous stuff that was important, right? So those are the subcategories. So I gave them the breakdown of like every class. I was like, the government scored this, the citizenship scored this, and that scored that. So each class had a winner, right? And then I gave them the breakdown for the whole 6th grade, right? So I gave them the breakdowns of all the other classes and said like, here is who, like, out of all the government for Athens in the whole 6th grade, here's what they scored, and here's the whole government for all of Sparta in the whole 6th grade, right? So they liked that too, I think, the breakdown. And it was super close. There was a couple rounds where like the score was literally tied, right?
Oh wow.
They had such good, like, arguments were good, and like I scored the same for both teams because they had good facts, good stuff, like. And so when I looked at it, I was like, oh, that's the same. And there was a couple categories where like one team like quote won, but it was like a 1-point margin.
Oh,
right. So there was a couple. They were really close. So it was really good.
Huh.
So it was good. But Team Athens won overall. Right. But again, not by a lot, like by just like a little bit. So it was pretty good.
Team Athens. Okay. How did they take the win?
They gracefully, as a 12-year-old does with victory, just accepts with grace and decorum, and dancing and shouting. Yeah, basically this is
perfect. Okay, yeah, no, as expected. Okay.
Yeah, on brand, right? There you go. Today we introduced the next one, which is the Greek myth Storytime. Yeah.
Yes.
Exciting. So, like, I think I mentioned this before, but like throughout the year, when we talk about certain things, like I just there'll be like the whole class period. Again, my class periods in the afternoon are like 25 minutes. So it's not like, when I say class period, I'm not talking like a whole hour here.
Yeah.
Where I just like orate the story to them, right? Like as this is a very Greek thing to do, like storytelling, verbally, oral sharing, right? This is like a Greek thing. So I tell them the story of like Theseus and the Minotaur. Like we talk about that one. That's a good one. We talk about when we talk about the Minoans, right? Because Crete, Minoans, that's what that story is based on. So I do that. I tell them the story of the Trojan War. So like the very, very Cliff Notes version of the Iliad, right? Like we get that. We get that in there.
Wow. Okay.
It's very good. They like that one. They think that's hilarious because I have a big note. I had to make note cards for that one. I was like, and then this guy's name is right. And then he fights, let me check some notes. Hector, right? Okay. And then we got the whole thing. But they liked that because they had read about it a little bit in like English class for like one of their reading and writing assignments.
Sure.
They read like a little bit about the Trojan War. So they liked getting to hear like more in detail about it. So this one I gave them, there's a list of myths, like mythological stories, and now it's their turn to tell them to the class. So they're going to have a partner and they can tell the class. So they can either like, how they do it is kind of vague on purpose, right? Like they can just like do like a normal presentation and just like have some pictures and just like tell it, right? They can be more theatrical and like tell the story, right? Or they can act it out and
okay.
Always always a bonus when they do the acting. It's always so good, right?
Yeah, obviously.
But they have some choices like Perseus and Medusa, right? Like the story of like somebody's doing like Persephone and Hades, right? That's a good one. The one that's like like Daedalus and Icarus, right? The King Midas, these like very classic, important. And I told them like some of these are really important because when I said King Midas, some of you knew what that meant, right? And even if it was only because they had an event in Fortnite about King Midas, right? The reason that they did that is because of this story,
right?
And so like right, that's a very, believe me, that's a very distressing sentence to have to say out loud. Okay, I understand, but like this,
yeah, I'm sorry you had to do that.
It's okay. But the reason that you know this is from this myth. So like learning about the myth is just kind of important because a lot of Western writing is still very like the allusions, right? If we talk about allusions in like figurative language, right? That is a lot of that is very Greek still. So Daedalus and Icarus is an important story to know about. Medusa is an important story to know about. Like Narcissus is an important story to know about because we have whole words in the language based on this, right? Like the story of Arachne. That is important because we have the word arachnid because of that story, right? Like those are connected. So this like vernacular and like words that we use are connected to these things from that way, right? Like Pandora's box, right? This is, people just know what that is, right? When you talk about things, like they'll be like, oh yeah, like opening Pandora's box, and still this is still a thing that you know about like thousands of years later. This is words in your lexicography that you are saying and alluding to something in conversation. So we just talk about that. So that's the next one. It's always really funny, right? I did it last year for the first time, and so it was hilarious. They did really good last year, so I'm hoping these guys do good too, because it'll be good.
Yeah, I think having that connection to the past is extremely beneficial, right? It really helps you seat yourself in the long line of tradition and in humanity as well, to be able to read back and go, this isn't just a word, right? Like or this isn't just a phrase, or this isn't just a person, but there is something very deep here that is connecting us across this. And I know that's probably a bit more romantic in that in that capacity, but I mean that's what that process is doing.
Well, I mean that's okay because like that like idea that you're like actually very physically connected to someone 2,000 years ago, like that thought process is like that like romantic way to think about it. Like that makes sense to a 12-year-old, right? Because they can grasp that like, oh wow, that's like a very direct thing.
Sure.
Right. Like all this other stuff, like building roads and blah, 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 whatever. But like this word origin or this like idea that I actually know about, I didn't know why I knew about it. I didn't know where it came from. Right. Like, some people like they didn't know the name Sisyphus. But when I said the boulder pushing guy, they were like, oh yeah, I know. I've heard of that. Right. Like, like, I know people don't really use Sisyphean in like modern lexicon, but that is a word that is used to describe like a very daunting, seemingly impossible thing, right? And that is directly from this story, right? Of again, Zeus just being the actual worst and just punishing people randomly, right? Like Prometheus, right? Like, oh, how about a giant buzzard eat your liver every day? Yay! Like what? What? You come up with this stuff, man. What's going on here?
Oh.
So we started that.
So what do you and which one are you starting on again?
I mean,
do you have a certain story or tale that you start with that you like as an introduction?
Oh no. They get to pick from the list, and that's like the list that they choose from, right? So it's like their menu. They can choose. They are choosing one from the menu and telling whichever one they like.
I'm tracking with you now.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So these are just that are on the menu. So today I kind of gave him the brief rundown of what some of these things were, so they could know which one they were interested in and wanted to read more about. So
I gotcha.
Yeah. So I have it's like a menu, and they basically say, "Oh, okay, I'm going to do that one." Okay, cool. So then tell me how and all that stuff. So
I'm tracking. Okay.
Yeah. So instead of story time with Mr. Funcaster, it's the story time with the class. Oh yeah.
Yep. Let's see what happens. You mentioned, my goodness, my throat is starting to close up. This is weird. But you mentioned your rubric, and I did want to ask that's always something that's hard for me to decide, not just how to put a good rubric together. I know this is kind of probably a weird question, but I am curious how you go about deciding. What did you know you wanted to tally for that rubric? Because that's what you did when you said, okay, here's the task that we're doing before us. How do you go about deciding what am I going to focus on for each of these? And I want to see what the students actually do.
So I always think about what does the end result need to be? Right. I sort of think about it backwards. I think about what should the end result be? What do I want?
Yeah.
And then I have to think about, okay, then I back up a step and say, okay, so what do they have to do to get there? Right? What information do I want at the end? And then we sort of backtrack from there and say, okay, in order to get to that information, what do they have to do along the way to get there? So when I was talking about as far as the debate one goes, a good and just how does the debate work, right? So a debate works, you have to have facts, right? You have to have strong statements because it's an oral argument, right? You have to do this, and you have to, visuals are nice for things like that. So I just sort of worked backwards and said, okay, well, what is I want the end product to be? And then I kind of think about what I need to get there, right? So another example is what's another thing? We did a severe weather presentation in science, right? A while ago. And so I thought okay, what's the most important things to do, right? And so then we say, okay, I want the end to be this, or the air pollution one be better, right? It's a little shorter. So we did one about pollution. And so I said, okay, we're talking about all this pollution in the atmosphere. Here's what I want you to know. I want this presentation to say these things. I want you to tell me what is the pollution that you're talking about? Okay, because there's lots of different kinds. So focus on one. Because I want you to focus on one singular thing. Because if we are trying to talk about pollution, but you're talking about multiple different kinds at the same time, it will get confusing and not make sense. Right. So focus on one. And so from that, I then moved backwards and said, okay, here are the choices you can have to do that. Right. Because they need some direction to start. So I know that I can't really normally just say do this, go, because they are 12 and they need direction, right? They need a starting place. So I have to say, choose from this list and then go from there, right? And then once they do that, I need to know okay, if I'm talking about pollution, I need to know where it comes from, right? So if we're talking about carbon dioxide pollution, tell me a source of carbon dioxide pollution. There's a million, right? Tell me one. Does it come from forest decay and stuff like that? Does it come from car exhaust? Are you talking specifically about factory exhaust, coal production? What are you talking about? And then what effect does that specific thing have on the environment? Right? What happens if there's too much carbon dioxide? What happens if there's too much sulfur oxides? Right? What happens if there's too much methane? The answer to these questions are different sometimes. Right? So tell me that. And then the last one, because we want to be critical and think about this thing, what is a solution?
Mm.
Right? What is a fix? What's something people are doing to help that problem? Right? Tell us about that. Because again, we want solutions. We want to think about ways to do that. So what we fix it. And then so that thought process, that's my 4 things that I want. That's my rubric is based on those 4 things. Type of pollution, where it comes from, what happens when it's in the atmosphere, how do you fix it? Boom. That's what I do. And those are my 4 big points. I tell them that these are what you need in your presentation. Here's your examples. Go from there. Right. So I think I always start with the end goal and then I work backwards because that just makes sense to me. Right. Of like, I know what I want the end product to look like. So how do we get there? Because otherwise you miss some steps like, giving them the menu choice. That's very helpful, I find, right? Like in every presentation, I don't know. I'm not going to say in every presentation I do that because I can't remember off the top of my head, but in a lot of them, I'll do that in some capacity, right? I'll give them like a resource or some place to start or some list of choose from this list or something like that so that they don't just feel overwhelmed, right? Because like another example, when we did the like gods one, like the Greek gods presentation, there's only like a billion Greek gods, right?
Yeah.
So like, I'm not going to tell you like, tell me about some Greek gods because they don't know how to find, they don't know who they are or what they are or where they come. So I make sure that they have for that one, I made sure to link a website or two. Here is a website that has information about the most important ones, the biggest ones, the ones you're most likely to hear about. And so start there. From those lists, pick your 2.
Gotcha.
And then go from there. Right. But it's very helpful to give them like some kind of starting point already. Right. Here's a starting point, even if it's just a list. Because like the severe weather one, like pick one of these types of weather. Go. Right.
Well, I think.
And then, like, okay, well.
Go ahead. Oh. Oh no. Right in. Right in. Hello?
Yes. Person who's totally been the whole time.
Okay. That was so weird. Okay. Well, I was going to say, obviously, that starting with the end in mind, I love how you started with that, really, of going like that really helps guide all of that of like basically, like we said, like what's the big takeaway for this? Like what is the key aspect that they need to walk away from this with? And then importantly, you have to tell them about that. And I've been thinking through this as we've been going through our training process with staff, going like what, not just like because I can word vomit all day long. And boy, howdy, there's plenty of video of me out there word vomiting.
There's lots of hours of audio recording as well. There's the
what? Yes, there is. So I need to figure out like it's fine if I word vomit, but I do need to let them know of the vomited words, what do they need to cling to?
Right.
What do they need to?
This also kind of helps, like when I make my like for just science, like science class in general, because I'm like, the way that I've been trying to do it the last few years, trying to do with various degrees of success, because sometimes I mess up, right? Obviously, but like I try to make sure, like that's how I made my tests for my class, like my quizzes, right? Because they say, you always hear like, well, don't teach the test. Like, Yeah, but I made the test though, so it's fine because these are the things that I want the kids to know for sure.
Mhm.
And then we sort of back up, and so like during the talking, during notes time, and all that stuff, that we'll make sure to like really talk about this like a lot because it's going to be really important later, right? And I'll even say things like, "This is probably you're gonna see this again," wink. So, wink, wink, right? Like it's gonna. I've tried to do that with my assessments too, like my little, because they're not usually very big or like super long and involved, but like I want to make sure that the important stuff is there, like the big things that are important for this whole lesson and this whole like section or whatever, like that's on there. So I've been really trying to think about like when I made them, like, all right, these are the most important things, and now I got to make sure I have everything else in there to back it up, to like reinforce the importance of these things. Like we're going to really hit these areas because that's what I want them to know by the end. You know what I mean? So even in like bigger designs, right? Like it goes that way. So that helps me do that. It doesn't always work that way because there's some things that I've done where I'm like, oh, I'm just going to do this. Like something I'm just like, we're going to do this project right now because I want to, and it goes along with this thought, and like it goes. So there is room for like randomness, but it's
oh sure. But as long as you're updating everybody with that process, right? That's not it's not a bad thing.
Yeah. But that's usually about the end. So yeah, it's a hard thing to do though, and like your situation's like a different because like it's similar because you want them to like.
Are you there? Oh my gosh. Okay. Well.
Back? Question mark?
Back.
Aha.
I am.
I don't know.
What...
Never left? Question mark?
So, after having never left. Yes. While my situation is a bit different, because I'm not having to progress them from like one stage to another. Like there's no grades or whatever. I do feel like I need to be better at sitting down and actually capturing truly what's the important stuff. Because that way, then I can put together a little bit of a progress for them. Okay, by 3 months, you should have this. By 6 months, they should have a good grasp of this. And that'll also help with like performance reviews and things like that. So
give them like one thing to work on at a time, right? To like focus on, right? Tell them about the other things, but like we're going to really focus on this, and then once you got that, okay, now we're going to focus on this, right? That might be better than it might make it less like overwhelming for them as well. You know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah. So I think without pushing our luck any further in the internet gods to keep them happy, see if that's in your Greek mythology.
Okay. I think that's a it's not the Greek mythology, but it's what's his name? The author guy. The American Gods guy. Neil Gaiman. It's a Neil Gaiman thing. Yeah.
Neil Gaiman. It is a Neil Gaiman thing. Yes. So we'll try and keep him appeased. And we'll just go ahead and go say bye very quickly and quietly. So we don't even notice that we left.
Bye. Love you too.
I love you.